It has been a true honour to be part of the Australian Ballet family and through that to have come to know artistic director David Hallberg. His career is remarkable by any measure. An artist who performed at the highest level on the world's most revered stages, including the American Ballet Theatre, the Paris Opera Ballet and the Bolshoi Ballet. David was the first American in its history to be invited to join the Bolshoi as a full-time company member. He was once described as the most exciting male ballet dancer in the Western world. Today, as artistic director of the Australian Ballet, we are extraordinarily fortunate to have a leader of such international distinction guiding one of our most important cultural institutions. Yet beyond the titles and the global achievements, what has moved me most is coming to understand the fuller human story behind his incredible career. Reading David's book, A Body of Work, Dancing to the Edge and Back, was genuinely affecting. The challenges he faced, the moments of isolation and the pivots that demanded courage and self-reckoning are not widely known, yet they bring profound depth to his already exceptional credentials. They reveal a leader shaped not only by excellence and opportunity, but by resilience, honesty, and a willingness to confront discomfort in order to grow. It is that unseen human journey that gives his leadership and his contribution to the arts such meaning and integrity. Whether you're a lifelong lover of the ballet or keen to experience it for the first time, I encourage you to listen to David's story and to consider how the depth of this journey gives greater meaning to the artistry he creates and the ballet he brings to life. David, welcome to Looples. I remember we went to a ballet dinner, when was it, last year sometime, and I remember saying quietly to myself, I really would love to pick up on that conversation. It was fantastic. And here we are.
Here we are.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Day after day, week after week, year after year, you've given yourself to the discipline of art. Its beauty, its precision, its leadership. But what was really interesting to me is when I read your biography, what stayed with me wasn't so much just the ballet. It was this incredible human story of you stepping forward through isolation, through injury, through bullying. There was a number of different things. And today I really wanted to begin by exploring the moments behind the curtain with you, the ones that shaped you as a person and not just as an artist. The way you described your early years was incredibly impactful in the book. The relentless bullying that you faced as a young man are some of the most confronting moments in your biography, A Body of Work. Not because you were trying to be different, but because you were simply being yourself. For the people listening who are still caught between the pain of not fitting in and the fear of losing themselves in order to belong, what would you say to them?
I would say something that I wouldn't have understood or listened to back then. So it's something that's actually hard to listen to, but I would say what they are saying pales in comparison to your drive or your passion or your natural way of being. And, I think looking back at when I was a kid, all I actually wanted was to be accepted by my peers. I just wanted to be liked and I wanted to fit in. But I had this passion to dance and I had this demeanor that was maybe more effeminate. And it didn't fit in really. So I would say, like, drive forward, like focus forward on your passion. And I have said that to kids who are being bullied, that boys who want to dance and they're being bullied. But it's something that I wouldn't have listened to when I was a kid.
When you were younger.
No.
Which makes sense, absolutely. Do you think that period sharpened something in you, a sensitivity, a discipline, and a way of seeing that almost became a part of your extraordinary career? Or do you think that there was a cost to you trying to stay true to who you were?
There was no cost because I couldn't help but be who I was. And the passion for my art form, the passion for to dance, like was just like it came from a place I didn't understand or know. It was a force stronger than me. And so I couldn't be anyone but who I was, but it was equally confusing to be like bullied and teased and not part of the cool crowd because of what came so naturally to me. So but I didn't make the choice to stop dancing or to hide it, or like I just couldn't. I had no comprehension of not being true to myself as a dancer, and then eventually not being true to who I am as a person. My sexuality and so I never compromised because I actually couldn't.
Yeah, it was innate in you. It was something you could...
It was unquestionable.
It's amazing. As a separate question, you were the first American premier dancer to join the Bolshoi Ballet in its history. For those who may not yet have had exposure to the ballet world, that appointment was absolutely extraordinary, not just professionally, but culturally and historically. Can you tell us a little bit about that appointment, just so we understand the significance around that moment for you and what it meant to step into an institution that is steeped with such huge tradition, nationalism and expectation as an outsider?
Yeah, so the invitation, sort of the boldness of the invitation came from the then artistic director, Sergei Filin. And he had just joined... Well, was a big star with the Bolshoi Ballet, and he was a new artistic director, and he just had this crazy idea to invite me, as a more permanent member of the company. It was reopening. The big historic theater was reopening after a very storied 6-year renovation.
Okay,
and so the first performance, the reopening, the gala performance, was. The invitation was for me to headline that show in The Sleeping Beauty. And I thought initially it would just be like an invitation to do a show there, but this enormous, offer came. And it was a really hard decision to make. It wasn't an immediate yes. Because first of all, I hated Moscow.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was putting myself in an uncomfortable situation. It would be enormous pressure, and I would upend my life in New York City. And then that's what excited me about it. I was just like, I needed something to scare me.
Wow.
And that's the offer that scared me. But I didn't realize the cultural and sort of historic significance until it was publicly announced. And then it was, on the cover of the New York Times. It was all over the news globally. It was, Hillary Clinton was congratulating me.
Was she?
Like, yeah, it was just, it just went so viral that I realized, wow, this is actually more than just me joining a ballet company. It was a bridging of a cultural gap. It was a sign that Russia was opening its doors. And a lot of people actually in Moscow, or Russians said, this is the end of Bolshoi Ballet.
Really?
We are now not training our Russian dancers. We have to invite someone to do the job that Russians should be able to do at the Bolshoi Ballet. Wow. And, I had to just take all that in, and then I had to deliver the goods. I had to dance well. It was a big risk for the director. It was a big risk for me. So I'd never felt such pressure that I did for those first performances.
I can imagine it's pretty significant. What do you think Moscow gave you that Paris and New York didn't?
Moscow gave me a new vocabulary. You know, in ballet, much like speaking a new language, it allows you to express yourself in a different way. And so through ballet, the Bolshoi gave me a new expression of ballet because they have their own technique.
Okay.
And a lot of people were saying, oh, like he's not Bolshoi style, he's more Parisian style, or, you know, softer, more lyrical. And Bolshoi style is much more brash, like it's externalized and lion-like. And I wasn't like that as a dancer. And that's exactly why I wanted to go. One of the reasons is because it would teach me a new vocabulary of my art form. And that's what it did. Absolutely. It took me way out of my comfort zone in terms of physical expression of ballet.
And it was a lonely time for you. I just recall you saying it was pretty isolating. Obviously, the move from the States and then to Russia is pretty challenging. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you find yourself in all of that?
Yeah, I guess like it was just like the pressure that I was under was the only thing on my mind. The delivery of the goods. And I didn't have time or even mental capacity for friends, for a social life in Moscow. And so I spent probably a good 12 months, you know, with no social life. I would go to work, and I was living behind the theater. So I would walk it took a minute to get to stage door. Yeah. And I would go to work, I would rehearse, I would focus, and I'd go home and I'd decompress, and then I'd rinse and repeat. It was lonely, but I wasn't lonely. Like it was a singular existence, but it almost needed to be for the first year because of because of the pressure.
Yeah.
And also because I really needed to just focus in and only devote myself to the craft. I know that sounds really cliche, but it was total devotion.
Single-minded devotion.
Yeah.
So talk to me, you've written in the book about wanting to belong so deeply that others came to define your sense of acceptance. How did you learn the difference between adapting to survive and losing yourself in the process?
I guess adapting to survive is what I mainly did. I felt like I wasn't like losing myself in the process at all. I felt like it was survival of the fittest. I actually felt, I described this a lot of feeling like I was in a pressure cooker, like feeling like I was being sort of boiled alive or something. that I just, I was there to survive.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've noticed in my life is like I really like to put myself in situations where I'm super challenged. And if I'm not super challenged, I get kind of bored. And so when I went to Moscow, I was challenged beyond like my wildest comprehension. And it was just to survive and to prove to myself, to the audience, to the world
that you could do it.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in understanding from you, David, when do you think that sense of worth shifted from needing people's acceptance to finding acceptance in yourself? Was there a way that helped you then move through the world, through your dancing? Was there a moment, or was it just a combination of things?
Yeah, the moment was like when I was 18 years old. It was when I moved to Paris, to the Paris Opera Ballet School. I left America, first time I'd ever left America. And I was this naive, American kid who spoke no French. And I went to France, to the most famous ballet school in the world, to train, and I wanted everyone to be my best friend. Very American. In a week, everyone was my best friend, at least I thought. But the French were like,
Yeah, not so much.
no thanks. And they ate me alive.
Yeah.
And when I was 18, I learned to not ask for people's acceptance because that environment when I was 18 in Paris didn't accept me. They rejected me.
But how does one do that?
How does one?
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you not have that expectation?
Yeah. Well, I spent the entire year alone, like, because I had no friends. But it was the best thing for me because I built this skin and I realized that I just needed myself and my craft. So then fast forward to Russia. When I moved to Russia, and Russians can notoriously be like stone-faced, like,
Yeah.
I didn't ask for acceptance. I was friendly because that's who I feel like I'm not naturally am. I was friendly to them, but I wasn't asking for people to accept me. I was just coming to do my work. And so that's the approach that I took because of what I had learned when I was 18 in Paris.
It sounds like there was a real strength in self, like hard earned, but you got there and you took that with you to Bolshoi, which made the experience even more magical.
Absolutely. And then I think like that has carried me throughout my life. Moving to Australia is the same. I moved here alone, put everything on a boat, all of my belongings, and flew here. And I have this sense of, I don't know, individuality or knowledge that I can survive. Because I survived in Paris, I survived in Russia.
Yeah,
Australia is not so bad. So.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as Russia, but I understand what you're saying. I would think that there's a huge weight of responsibility shifting from a dancer that can be sometimes quite insular and individual to the opposite end of the spectrum where you're now leading a group of 80 dancers and administration team. Do you often feel alone or challenged by that weight?
I probably feel more alone professionally now than I have ever felt. As a dancer, you're in this very bizarre bubble of other artists and physical artists. So you're partnering your partners, you're laughing, you're sweating together, you're expressing an art form, you have a similar passion. So you have this in a company, you have this amazing sort of community that is singular to anywhere else, I think, in the world. And now as artistic director, it's much more lonely. It is so lonely sitting in front of the studio, watching a rehearsal, directing a rehearsal, then being amongst the dancers, dancing in the rehearsal. So that's been a really big adjustment in this period to have to be okay with that because I can't fight that.
Yeah, is it just part of the role and the expectation of it to be able to remove yourself and I guess...
It's part of the role and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I need to... I have no choice.
Yeah, no, you're in. But who's shepherding you? Who's sort of guiding you in those moments of alone?
I guess this is going to sound, I don't know, cliche, but it's still the art form that's shepherding me. Like, this is my calling in life. And so what gets me through it is the beauty of this art form, is the beauty of art, the expression, the passion, the talent that comes from this art form, watching those rehearsals, watching the shows, watching these dancers become, fully bloomed artists. That's what gets me through it. Yes, there are people that get me through it. Absolutely. But it's always been this art form.
Yeah,
Paris, Russia, Australia.
That's beautiful, David. It really is. You discuss with openness, and I just want to take a step back in your book, a moment regarding your sexuality, which you called a fork in the road. The choice between protecting yourself with silence or risking everything by being honest about that part of you. What did choosing that truth in that moment teach you about the kind of strength it takes to live fully and authentically, especially in a world where people can often feel like they need to edit or conceal who they are in order to fit in?
Yeah, it's interesting realizing at any stage in one's life that you're not a heterosexual person in society, because there's just an expectation that someone is heterosexual until like proven differently, I think. There was an expectation when I was a kid, even my self-expectation of having a girlfriend. And I had girlfriends. And of course, then I realized that I like wasn't so into that, and started to, you know, find other guys cute, and that sort of became stronger and stronger. But one thing is, I think through life, as I've gotten older, I do realize how challenging that still is. It feels so natural. It is so natural. It feels so natural. But you really work against it still. You work against people's idea of what things should be, of how people should live. I've always felt very authentic internally, but it's more like the societal experience that makes you feel less authentic. And of course, in 20 years, there's been amazing work. I mean, have you watched Heated Rivalry, for God's sake? It was more like society that was the struggle and not my own authenticity.
And I think even at the Bolshoi, you and I talked about this offline, but not only had you had, the first American at the Bolshoi Ballet, but this pressure around being a gay man in Russia at that time really would have been significant for you, no doubt. How did you navigate belonging in worlds that just weren't built for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think I have experienced worlds that maybe weren't built for me. Like when I was a teenager experiencing public high school, public middle school, that was a world that wasn't built for me. I needed to find an arts school that was that was my community. So I sort of had experience of worlds that weren't necessarily my fit, but it's complicated, living in a country that sexuality is really problematic. I had a boyfriend in Moscow, and I felt like I was going back in time. Like we couldn't, show public displays of affection. I couldn't hold his hand because your safety is in question. And that's really confronting. I have to say, there is a community there, a gay community in Moscow. I had friends that were, were gay, and you do find your way. It makes one realize how lucky you are to live in a city like New York, a city like Melbourne, where you can openly express yourself.
David, you experienced a moment of real reckoning in your career with a career-altering, or let's call it life-altering injury.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't understand the significance and impact of your injury, could you briefly describe what it was and how debilitating it was for you?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that I would describe is like this was my instrument. This was my car if I were an F1 driver. This was my violin if I were a musician. Yeah. And I abused my instrument. at one point because things, when I went to Bolshoi, my career just exploded in terms of opportunity. And I had invitations to all the companies I ever dreamed of, and I couldn't say no. So I said yes to everything. And I was bouncing around the world, and I just didn't take care of my instrument. I didn't tune it up. I didn't rest it. And I eventually started to feel a pain in my foot, which I ignored for about 9 months. And it just got worse and worse. I was returning to New York with the Bolshoi in a big tour at Lincoln Center. And I was doing opening night Swan Lake. And I couldn't jump off of my left foot. I had to change all of the jumps to the other side. And I knew I had to stop. And so I had a surgery. The surgery was botched. I had a second surgery to fix the first. And all of that was in basically a year's time of trying to get back. And then I just saw everything starting to slip through my fingers. I had lost total control of the rehabilitation of my career. I was in the prime of my career, put on hold because of this foot injury. I just lost it. I crashed and burned. I knew something had to change. And there was the fork in the road.
Yeah.
One was give it everything I've got to get back on stage, or retire, stop. And you never think you're gonna be the one for anything.
Yeah.
You don't think you're gonna be the one to have tragedy in your life. You don't think you're gonna be the one to get cancer. You don't think you're gonna be the one to have a career-ending injury. And I was quite humbled.
And there you are. You're so right. I mean, for me personally, that is completely 100% the truth. What struck me when I was reading the book and you were describing the injury was, it seems to me that you, through your story, you moved through in a way that you learnt to override discomfort, both emotionally and later physically in your life, from the bullying, then the injury. You went through it. You kept stepping forward, kept pushing through. Having spent so much of your life learning to push through the emotional pain, do you think that resilience made it actually harder for you to hear when your body started whispering? Did you just sort of think, no?
Yeah, it was two things. That was it, yes. It was this kind of drive. It became this kind of obsession of pushing myself to the absolute limit. But the second thing was ego. Like, I was on top of the world. How could I ever be anywhere else? That was my thinking back then.
Yeah.
And that ego developed. It got bigger and bigger. And so I thought I was invincible. And so when I see ego in like other people, I can just sniff it out so easily.
It's so true. Yeah, that's a really interesting way of describing it, but it's true.
But then when you see someone who doesn't really have that unhealthy ego, because you have to have healthy ego to realize, enormous ambition. And when you see someone who's actually a genuinely nice person, but they're so talented. The Australian Open just happened, and Carlos Alcaraz, he's just such a nice guy.
So elegant.
Yeah, so nice.
Yeah.
So there's the fork in the road.
There's a fork in the road. So, David, can you just tell me a little bit? You said something before about the moment, whether it's injury, whether it's cancer. I really loved in your book when you described your injury about life, you described it as before and after. And it really deeply resonated with me because so many of us arrive at that line through different doors. Take me to the room in Melbourne with Sue Mays and the incredible world-renowned rehabilitation team where coming back felt first possible. What changed in your mind the day your injury moved from enemy to collaborator?
The day I arrived, actually, is when it changed. The enemy was in New York. I boarded a Qantas plane with a freshly shaved head. I landed in Melbourne, and that's when it became collaborator, because I relinquished control. I realized I cannot control it anymore. The tighter I'm holding on to it, the harder it is, the more impossible it is. So I relinquished control. And then it became collaborator. And yes, I had Sue Mays. I had Megan Connolly. I had Paula Baird Colt. I had the Australian Ballet, who opened its doors to me. I mean, just so forever grateful for those opportunities that they afforded me. But I relinquished control, and that's when it started to work. But that's not what I had been used to.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for people going through that kind of rupture, whether it's injury, illness, loss, whatever it is, what would you say to them?
I spent a lot of time wallowing in like a weight of sadness over it all. I spent, even in Australia when I came and I relinquished control, I was still enormously sort of reflective on lost opportunity. And I wasted so much time on negativity and sorrow and like a weight of kind of depression. So I guess what I would say is, yes, relinquish control, but also find the growth, the opportunity, the ability to rebirth yourself, even though it is enormously hard. I'm not discrediting whatever one goes through as not challenging, but find the life in it, find the growth in it as much as possible.
So just on that, if you could speak to the version of yourself the night before the surgery in the US, you'd probably say don't do it. But if you could speak to yourself there, or even flying to Australia for the rehabilitation, what single sentence would you say?
I would say believe that everything is meant to be the way it is. And it just sounds so cliche when I voice it.
Because you're at the bottom of the mountain and you're thinking, I don't know how to climb.
Yes, and I wouldn't have seen that clearly then. So I wouldn't have listened to myself. But now that I look back on it, I am sitting here having this conversation with you because of my trip to the hospital that one day, or because I got on that plane to come rehab here in Australia. My life, my role as artistic director of the Australian Ballet, me knowing you, is because of that. So everything is meant to be the way it should. I was not meant to continue to have that enormously self-inflated ego. It was meant to be for me to completely lose all sense of self-worth and validity and ego, for me to build myself back up in a human aspect with humility. And that's why I'm here today, because of that.
That is so beautiful. That is really beautiful.
Thanks. I really believe it.
But it really resonates with me too. I think it makes sense when you feel like you're really stripped bare and you need to recalibrate and start again. I think that's incredibly inspiring. You write that the ballet can be incredibly precarious. One misplaced step, one off-kilter landing, and something can break. Even as it appears effortless, which you and the dancers make it appear that way to the audience, understanding that pressure it's just a whole nother level. I mean, ballet dancers are athletes. So how do you and the dancers manage the inner voice, the fear, the calculation, the doubt, while still surrendering to the performance in front of hundreds of people?
I think the doubt and the fear sometimes, the insecurity of the artist or of the performer, comes hand in hand with being a performer. Now I'm sitting on the other side. Like, I'm not in the spotlight anymore, thankfully. And I'm experiencing what audiences experience and loving it, but also realizing how tightly a performer holds their performance, how much scrutiny they put themselves under, how much fear and doubt they go through to lead up to a performance or to be in a performance. And when it doesn't go as planned, how devastated they are. And I experienced all of those things. I mean, as a dancer, I could probably put on one hand in 20 years of a career the performances I was satisfied with.
Really?
Yeah, I was never satisfied. But now, I tell the dancers, like enjoy it, like relax, like all those, things that you tell performers. And it's a balance, because all of that work and all of that kind of focus and all those nerves actually sometimes bring the best out of a performer.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes them exceptional, I would think.
And gives them that edge.
Yeah.
I can always see when a dancer is working to their limits or a little lazy. You can just see it in the way they stand.
Really?
Yeah. Then there comes a time where you have to sort of relinquish that kind of control or that hard work and let something evolve on stage in the moment. And I think it's a bit of a balance. You have to push yourself to a limit, and then you have to actually let yourself fly. It's like going off a cliff, You push yourself to the limit, and then you feel this kind of like,
Yeah.
and that's the performance. And that is so hard to achieve.
And to control, I would think.
Yeah, and to control. That's the beauty of performance, is like it's this one moment and then it's gone. And were you there for it, or were you not? Did you see this show or did you not? And I think that's the relinquishing of the control as the performer to the audience.
There's a moment in every artist's life where the dream falters. What's the most important failure or challenge that shaped you and who you are now? And what do you think the greatest lesson has been from that challenge?
I think apart from like my enormous foot injury.
Yeah.
Like, let's park that for a second. Yeah. I would say my most recent failure as a performer were my last performances as a dancer.
Really?
Yeah, they were at the Royal Ballet in London.
Yeah.
I had hit another, pinnacle. I was a principal guest artist at the Royal Ballet, like something that, that was very seldom achieved. I was dancing with like my soulmate, Natalia Osipova. And I just became so doubtful, so fearful, so riddled with insecurity. My self-expectation, other people's expectation, it just all caved in. And I just lost who I was as a performer. That's when I knew I was done. But the last performances, like, I just could not enjoy, because I just felt like I was failing every time.
Really?
And what I learned was, at one point or another, you need to rise above all of that insecurity. And that's really hard to do. Even in this job, I'm managing like 75 dancers, and all of that inner dialogue. Do they like me? Am I doing a good job? Am I nurturing them enough? Am I giving people what they want? You just have to kind of, at one point, like, rise above it and realize the more important pillars other than just the noise.
What strikes me with you, David, is that you've been through moments that could have broken you. We talked about, the bullying, the injury, the loneliness, the self-doubt, but you turned them into something beautiful. Do you think that art can heal pain?
I do think there's a difference between experiencing art and expressing art. So I think both, to answer your question clearly, like art can heal pain, but as an artist, like I have danced through heartbreak. I have danced through, devastation of having a broken heart or whatever was going on in my life. And art healed that. But as a spectator, as an audience member, as someone experiencing art, I mean, that's the beauty of seeing something, of hearing something, of watching someone perform. That's the reaction that people have when they listen to singers. It's going to sound really cheesy, but like that's the reaction people had over, Michael Jackson and Lady Gaga or whoever else. I mean, the list is long, because they find solace and healing through art. So it's twofold for me.
It's twofold, yeah. For people who love ballet but may not fully understand it from the outside, your book speaks candidly about its extreme physicality, and we touched on it before. The endurance, the injuries, the relentless discipline to actually achieve. And I said before that the dancers are true athletes. I don't think people truly understand that concept that are not inside the ballet world. Can you help articulate the grueling nature of ballet and what it actually demands of the body and mind?
Yeah, so it begins at around 10 years old.
Wow.
All you have to do is YouTube, the Vaganova school in St. Petersburg and how they begin to train 10-year-olds to eventually potentially become dancers for Mariinsky Theater or Bolshoi in Russia. Your body is an instrument, and you tune the instrument, but it takes years and years and years of the smallest movement over and over to train the instrument to the demands of the art form. And that continues until you retire as a professional dancer, if you become a professional dancer. But what I love about ballet is that there's no such thing as nepotism.
Yeah.
It absolutely, like it is based on how you express the art form. It's based on talent. It's based on self-expression, individuality. It's based on how you use your instrument. And I think that's so interesting. But it just is so intense. People would ask me at times, parents, what they would say, my teenager, he doesn't really know if he should go to university or should, go through the career of ballet because you can't really do both. And I always say, if you're even asking that, it's not the profession for you.
Yeah.
Because when you are, propelled by this, there's no question. And that's the devotion that it needs and the devotion that it demands of you.
It's so interesting you say that. I was in the audience when Callum, who is a principal artist of the Australian Ballet, became a principal artist. I'll never forget it. I was new to the ballet, and it was just this, you brought him out on stage and you told him he was going to be a principal, and the emotion that flowed from him was unbelievable. And I thought to myself, for those that are unfamiliar with the ballet, can you talk us through the years behind that single moment? Because what it takes really to arrive there and to become a principal which is, the pinnacle in ballet world. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
So becoming a principal artist at the Australian Ballet, or a principal artist in any company, is many dancers' biggest dream. Not all, but most. And when you reach that moment, obviously it's just years and years of development. So yes, you land a contract with the Australian Ballet.
Yeah.
And then you begin the professional journey. And you start out, doing really important roles, but in the group, corps de ballet roles. And then you start to, move up in the ranks. So the Australian Ballet is based on rankings, and the top is principal artist, and where you start is the corps de ballet, and then there's other rankings. So you slowly climb your way up, and then it's hope.
Yeah.
Where one day, you become a principal artist. And when you're senior artist, so you're the rank just below principal artist, you're sort of waiting for that moment where traditionally here at the Australian Ballet, the artistic director, myself, comes out with a microphone at the end of a performance in front of the audience. You've just done the lead role, and announces to the audience, surprises the dancer, that tonight, please join me in applauding the newest principal artist of the Australian Ballet, Callum Linnane.
Yeah.
And that's just the day.
It's magical.
Yeah, you never forget.
No. I didn't, sitting in the audience. It was pretty phenomenal. When you look into the eyes of your young dancers, there's 75 of them, you mentioned before, what do you hope they carry forward, not just as artists, but as humans?
One thing that I think dancers always carry with them is a sense of work ethic. And it sounds very regimental of me, but it's ballet teaches you how to focus, how to work for something. So when you leave ballet as an art form, you have this instilled in you, this sense of focus and kind of drive. So that will be with them sort of inevitably. But one thing you do realize as well, naturally, is how unbelievably unique this world is, how privileged this world is. And I don't say privilege as something, separated between us and them. I say privilege as it's such an honor to have this privilege of expressing this art form. Some people don't agree with me. Some people think ballet is totally boring. And I think, AFL might be a little bit boring. Yeah. Everyone has their opinion.
Everyone has their thing, yeah.
But I think it's just such an amazing privilege. And I hope that they leave and they realize how great of a ride it was.
Ballet has inherited strong ideals about who it's for and what it should look like. Where do you feel responsibility to open the form both culturally, socially and emotionally while still protecting the discipline and ideals and rigour that give balance to or give ballet its power?
That's a really tricky question. Thank you.
Well, you knew it was going to come.
That's it. I knew the curveballs were coming.
There's a couple more of those.
Because, the perception of ballet, I'm I'm not deaf to it, that it's elitist, that it's only for a certain few. And I think we have work to do, continual work to do, to bring this art form to more people than those that can afford to come to the Opera House in Sydney. There isn't an expectation that people come to us. I think it's our responsibility to come to people. But we are based on a very traditional set of code of conduct, and that is the ballet art form. The how you execute it, how you perform it, what you perform. But I think the future of this art form, yes, is in like the great classics of our art form, like Swan Lake and The Nutcracker and Sleeping Beauty, things that people still love and come to, but also to really broaden the offering, the storytelling to today's people, to our stories. We told the story of Oscar Wilde a couple of years ago, and that was based on Oscar's love affairs with other men. And in ballet, we tell a very heteronormative story. The prince falls in love with the princess. And we broadened that perspective. And I have to say, I would sit in the performance of Oscar night in, night out, in the upper circle, in the middle, with a community that never been to the ballet before. And I think it's our job to sort of tell stories that people can resonate with.
Absolutely. Do you think that that's one of the most important things for the ballet to continue doing, reshaping how we think and feel, in terms of, and is that then directly leading into the kind of community that you want to bring to the ballet?
Yes. I mean, I think we just have to continue to define what the art form is for people today.
And interestingly, you touched on it before, from international collaborations to Australian voices, you're curating a repertoire that showcases a spectrum of ideas. How do you decide which work stretches the dancers and which works stretch the culture at the Australian Ballet?
Well, the sweet spot is it stretches both at the same time. That would make my job really easy.
Yeah.
But I think it's a balancing act, because sometimes the dancers are more satisfied or satiated by certain repertoire or ballets that maybe audiences don't resonate with as much, and vice versa. So it's about striking that balance. But if we don't have an audience, we don't have a company. Audience, and who comes to see ballet, who comes to see the Australian ballet is paramount. Because if we don't have them, if we don't satisfy them, then who are we?
David, artistic director David versus principal artist David. Where do they disagree and how do they resolve it at rehearsal call time?
They do disagree. Principal dancer David was way too calculated. Artistic director David wants to see, any artist let things happen more spontaneously. And I wished I would have just chilled out a bit more as a dancer. I was way too uptight. I should have had a beer before a show, the night before. I should have risked more. And now as artistic director, David, that's what I wish for in the artists that I'm watching and developing, to risk more, to, yes, use that kind of, those nerves, as I said, for good, but don't let them debilitate your potential to become something that you don't know actually yet who you can become. So in the rehearsal studio, it's, a balance between what I experienced as a dancer and what I really want them to experience. I want them to experience spontaneity and surprise in themselves, in what they do. And that's essentially what the audience wants to experience. They want the surprise. And so, there's just in the studio, there's acceptance of what I thought was the right path. And that's the path I took, to now what I hope, the dancer, what path they will take and how I can guide them down that path. The path of surprise.
The path of surprise. You lead one of the most revered ballet companies in the world, yet your leadership, and I've seen it firsthand, is grounded in vulnerability, authenticity, collaboration, and creative risk. What does modern leadership look like to you? What does it mean?
I think modern leadership, thank you, by the way, because that's what modern leadership looks like to me. I'm taking myself out of the equation. Like, I crave vulnerable leadership, vulnerable people, honest people, to show them their human self. Hopefully how I lead the company here. I think as a dancer, I don't think I risked creatively enough. The ballet world really wanted me to be the prince. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
But I had interests in really avant-garde stuff. And so I want the Australian ballet, yes, to be the beautiful classics that we're known for, but also to be an arts institution that is grounded in surprise and in creative birth, creative risk. And with risk comes the fact that it might work and might not work.
It may not. Yeah,
That's
right.
the beauty of making art.
Is there something you're dreaming of doing that is scary, that might surprise people?
I think I know I've already done things that have surprised people. They've written me the letter and told me. And I hope that continues. I hope we continue to surprise people.
Yeah. Many cultural institutions create excellent work, but fewer carry the responsibility of representing a nation on the world stage. How does that mandate to be both nationally anchored and internationally competitive fundamentally change what's required of the Australian ballet?
That's a tricky one for an American as artistic director of the Australian ballet. It's one that I have taken really seriously since day one because I love Australia so much. Since the moment I came here in 2010, it makes me a little emotional even. I'm waiting to be a citizen. I'm waiting to be told that I'm allowed to be an Australian citizen. Knowing how important the Australian ballet is to Australians. And I think actually I have been more conscious of that than even my predecessor, David McAllister, who is Australian through and through, didn't have to think twice about being Australian. And so now I have enormous respect for respecting the Australianness of the Australian ballet and what that means and who that is, who's on our stages, to then who represents us globally. The Australian ballet has had a global reputation since its inception in 1962. The greatest dancers came and danced for the Australian ballet. And to uphold that reputation, to redefine what that reputation is globally now, I'm very aware of. I don't want us to be the Bolshoi ballet. I don't want us to be the Royal Ballet in London. I want us to be the Australian ballet. And whenever we go to London, to New York, to Paris, to Renmark and Tanunda on our national tour, we are through and through uniquely defined as the Australian ballet and no one else.
David, I've got something I want to share with you. I reached out to someone And I wanted to share it with you, particularly when you were talking about, taking risks. That's been part of what you've done with the repertoire. This is actually from Christopher Wheeldon. And it says, if you don't mind me reading this to you.
Go for it.
Dear David, my first real introduction to you was standing behind you in an open class in New York. I remember watching your back, the ease of your placement, the clarity of your line, the natural intelligence of your body, and thinking quite simply, this is all I ever wanted to be as a dancer. I had just retired then, aware that my time on stage had come to an end. While you were just emerging new on the scene, already embodying something timeless, we shared qualities I valued deeply: elegance, restraint, clarity. But even in that moment, it was clear you were 10 times the dancer I had been. Not just through bravura, but also through depth, generosity of presence and innate artistry. What I couldn't have predicted was how that admiration would grow into friendship, and how that friendship would invite courage. David, you encouraged me to be brave, to create one of the first full-length classical story ballets centred on a gay figure, Oscar Wilde, and to trust that that form could hold that story with honesty and dignity. You quietly pushed me to challenge the audience, not through provocation, but through belief in clarity, in elegance and in truth. Watching you step into the role of director has not been unexpected. The musical intelligence, the clarity of thought, the authority without ego were always there. What has been exciting is seeing how fully you've stepped into that role, how comfortable you seem in it, how completely you have claimed your voice and your power. There is an ease now, a confidence that feels earned, and it's thrilling to witness an artist continue not just to evolve but to expand. That arc from dancer to collaborator to leader is what I admire most, and it's why working alongside you has been such a privilege. You bring the same integrity, curiosity, and generosity to every chapter of your work. David, you work so hard to bring an old art form into the future, both on stage and off. Christopher.
Wow.
How does that make you feel? I was blown away when I read that letter.
Well, Chris is a friend, dear friend, but someone that the entire dance world has enormous respect for. So, I take that with a grain of salt. It's hard for me to hear it, really, but I know it's genuine. So it just feels, a great assurance that I guess I am doing something right. That all of this is on a really good path. I deep down feel it is, even though there's been hardships, but to have that recognition from someone who's
amazing.
Yeah, so amazing. It is it's great to hear.
One of the ideas at the heart of Looples is that the climb matters as much as the destination. You've written about being so focused on the top of the mountain that you couldn't see the work directly in front of you. At what point did you realise the climb itself, the questions you ask, the way you work matters as much as reaching the summit?
I think I finally realized that when I stopped dancing. I think when I stopped performing and being in the spotlight, I kind of I chilled out a little bit. Thank God.
Yeah.
I stopped looking for the next. And thankfully, because now I'm in this role and I'm so focused on my life in this role, my life in Australia. I remember when I got an invitation to dance at Paris Opera. That is an invitation I thought I would never get, and I got, and because of my time at the school and how hard it was kind of like I was coming back as a guest artist. It was this whole life coming in a weird circle. But I got the invitation, and then I immediately took a moment of total elation. And then I was like, what's next? I couldn't even enjoy
Joy.
that ride, really. And now I'm not looking to what's next. I'm not. And I think it's because I'm in a different place in my life. I'm older, yes, but I'm just not in the spotlight anymore. Feels great.
It feels like the pressure is off. Well, not really, actually.
The pressure is so on.
It's so on. It's
Let's
true.
be honest.
Your contract extension to 2030 signals trust and a long horizon for the Australian Ballet. If the headline in 2030 captured your tenure in one sentence, what do you hope it says?
That I guided the potential of this organization to its fullest.
Wow.
That was exhausting.
Yeah.
I think, my goal is to help artists here or the organization just realize how special it is, how special they are. I've always known that about this company because I maybe experienced elsewhere. I just know how great this company is, and I want it to adhere to it, what it has, the talent that it has, because it's just an amazing, amazing company.
Yeah, here. If you could speak to your younger self, the boy who first stepped into a studio with impossible dreams, what would you tell them about the beauty and brutality of this life?
I guess I would say, the path is not going to be easy, but it'll absolutely be worth the rough road. Life in general, it's bumpy.
Yeah.
And, I think when I was young, I just catastrophized my experiences. I was so sensitive to like all of the bullying and the imbalance between my passion to dance and like society not accepting that, really. Knowing that if you stay on that course, you will reap the benefits.
What strikes me is that you stop short of calling it sacrifice. You describe your talent not as something to protect, but something to honour. And it's a gift that clearly comes with responsibility. It actually feels like a powerful reminder to each of us that we're all blessed in some way with something incredible to be nurtured, not for applause or approval, but just for ourselves and answering our own individual calling. So I think that's a really powerful message, and thank you. In your book, David, you write about your parents choosing a road less travelled, one that many parents don't, one guided by love rather than fear and belief rather than convention. They didn't try to redirect you towards a more safer or socially acceptable path. They simply wanted to help their son become who he already was. For children who feel that same pull today, and we touched on it in the beginning of our conversation, and for the parents standing beside them, what would you say?
I would say there isn't a mold or a path that any one child has to fit into. The allowance of self-expression and the ability to follow a passion, the ability to love who you want to love, the ability to live a life that they maybe don't even know or aren't familiar with, is the best path a parent can take. Because if you force a path for a child, the results can be devastating. It is, I think, a parent's absolute foremost responsibility to let their child flourish in whichever way that they feel fits them.
So there's one more letter. And that letter is from your mother.
Oh my God, you did it.
I sure did. She is such a beautiful soul, but you knew that already. I'd like to read this last letter to you.
Okay.
Dear David, do you know how much you are loved? It started when you were born with your golden blonde hair and pointed chin. Your brother wasn't even 2 and was mesmerised with you. And your parents fell in love with a second bundle of baby boy. As a child, you were incredibly brave. You knew you were different, yet you didn't understand it. You persevered with your early love for art, dance, movement, acting, and girls. When you were in the 3rd grade, you organised the neighbourhood kids and produced and starred in a backyard version of Les Mis. You acted, danced, sang, and created costumes and sets while the audience of parents sat in their lawn chairs and were entertained and delighted. You were funny, goofy, a cut-up, and you were very sensitive. We knew early on there was something wonderful and unique. Yet you were still willing to explore, with Brian, the usual all-American things: T-ball, gymnastics, swimming, diving, and soccer. We thought it was cute when you made your own tap shoes with your Sunday loafers and taped coins on the bottom. Those shoes and a little red tape player were the earliest memories of our tap and jazz kid. And then the teasing started, in school and in the neighbourhood, and life got more complicated. Where did all this come from? Why you? All we knew is that we wouldn't get in the way and we'd protect you. You were a joy to support, to guide, to console, and to protect. And you became so strong, so tough, so determined, yet still naive in a beautiful way. Your mum, your dad, and your brother had your back, and as did some special teachers and schools. We are so proud of you for the beautiful and kind person you are, and for the artist and leader you are. You are a gift to me, your mother, and to your family and to your world. With so much love it can't be measured. From your mum to my wonderful son, David.
That's beautiful.
It is really beautiful. How does that make you feel when you hear that?
Well, there's nothing like your mother. And, she's just the greatest woman. But it makes me feel that they really took the right path. They just let me be who I had to be. And they let me, I wasn't asking their permission. That's such a son answer, to not ask for their permission, but they accepted me for who I wanted to love. And I'm so proud of them, and for her and my dad, for instinctually letting their son, who, yes, was, not like other kids in suburbia America, be who I wanted to be. And I am here today, again, talking to you because they allowed me to realize dreams.
She's a beautiful woman. I can't wait to meet her when she comes to Australia. She actually said to me she's going to send a letter to your brother. She felt like it was a really good task and she wants to do the same for your brother.
Yeah.
David, listening to you in this conversation, there is a passion and a hard-earned perspective that lives beyond your dancing, shaping how you lead, how you show up and how you choose connection over distance. In many ways, this is what the art of change asks of us, to accept that our journeys are rarely linear and to keep showing up with courage and conviction and belief in ourselves as the path unfolds. I just want to thank you so, so much for being a part of Looples, taking a leap of faith with me. It's so appreciated.
Well, listen, you come very well prepared, Helen. Those letters are the true curveball, your secret formula. But thank you. Thank you for the honesty. Thank you for, the really honest journey. So
appreciate it. Thank you, David. Lupul's conversations are available on your preferred podcast platforms. For exclusive behind-the-scenes insights, head to lupuls.com.